Here's what I want you to do real quick before we dive into the message. I want you to get in your mind, think of somebody that is lonely. It could be you, it could be a friend of yours, family member, just somebody that's kind of dealing with or walking through some loneliness, all right? I want you to think about that person. Now I want you to think, during that time of loneliness, where they were, was there a decision that they made that maybe wasn't super helpful? All in the name of not being lonely. You know, maybe it's a relationship that somebody jumped into and they didn't need to, or maybe a relationship that somebody stayed in that they really needed to get out of. Maybe it was a job opportunity that somebody jumped at thinking that it would kind of cure this feeling of loneliness. Right, here's the deal. Here's what we know, that loneliness and being lonely is a real thing. And it's painful and it's not a lot of fun. And there's a whole lot of people that deal with that feeling of loneliness. And there's some things that can come out of that loneliness that just aren't very healthy. But as we're continuing on in this series, The Thrill of Hope, we're going to take a look at loneliness today and kind of where it comes from and God's perspective on loneliness. So why don't we jump right in and join Chris for part 3 of our series, The Thrill of Hope.
Hey, thanks for watching. Wherever you are, we are so glad. The week before Christmas, running right into the holidays, wherever you are, we're so glad that you'd spend time with us. I know some of you are just long-term friends of Journey or friends of our team here who are watching from all over the country. Can we just say it means so much to us that you would do that? And then for some who are kind of just checking us out, going, I'm not sure if this is a church for me, we're thrilled that you give us a little bit of your time today. And then for some who just aren't able to be at church today, you typically are in-person attenders and you're sick, you're out of town, you're whatever, hey, it means a ton that you would take time for this. We are so glad as we move into the Christmas season, we can spend this time together. Hey, so I want to start off with a question for you, whoever you are, wherever you're watching from today. Now, are you a person who loves like noise and activity, like the chaos around you just brings life to you? Like truthfully, when things get really quiet and really settled and you kind of get in your own head, it drives you a little bit nuts? Are you that person who just thrives from more? So sometimes the Christmas season is full of that. It's ideal for you. Or are you somebody who really would prefer we could just lower the volume a little bit, just chill? I just want to catch a breath. Sometimes I just need my alone time. Which one are you? Are you more the chaos or are you more the chill? Are you more the, let's bring it on, more people, a house full? Or are you, man, if we could just tamp all that down, I just need quiet. Which one are you? More like, maybe not exact, but one side or the other. Let me ask you another one. Are you somebody who around Christmas time, if you could, now I'm not suggesting you do it because this will start all kinds of arguments. Are you one, if you could enjoy the little Christmas season, especially right around Christmas Day, if you could just cut out and have fewer people, like if I could just reduce the number of humans that I have to deal with through this time, that would make my Christmas so much more special. Maybe that's how you're feeling. That could be for a lot of reasons. There may be all kinds of awkward in your relationships. Sometimes Christmas pushes people together that aren't usually together and it doesn't always play out well. None of you probably know what I'm talking about, but you probably know somebody who does. Or are you somebody on the other side that said, I'll be honest with you, if I could just select some people and add to my world, man, Christmas would be so much more meaningful. As a matter of fact, right now, I'm really missing some of that in my life. I just wish I had somebody that was special, somebody that I enjoyed, somebody I could do special things on a special day, if I could just add more. Are you, I wish I could have fewer, or you, I wish I had a few more? Which one would you be? Well, Christmas is one of those times that are so bizarre because Christmas kind of magnifies whatever is in life in other areas. It shows up in different ways. So I've been reading the last few days and getting ready for this message, really for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, been reading about it. I want to just tell you some did you know things. Now, I love statistics, and so I love this. If you don't love statistics, just nod off for a second. You can come back when I'm done with them. But they apply to you at least in some way. So let me give you a few. You ready? Ready? Did you know that on our planet, we've got about 7.9 billion people, almost 8 billion people right now. Who knows the exact number? But that's not what I want to talk about is how many are here. I want to talk about how many we're adding every day. Did you know that we add to the population about 1.1% a year? If we put that in smaller numbers, we'd say it like this. About 83 million people per year are added to the population, 83 million. If we break it down a little bit further, that's about 6.9 million people per month that we add to the population. So we're growing our numbers. About 227,000 per day, if you want to break it down. If you want to get further, that's about 9,500 people per hour that we add to the human race on our planet Earth. If you want to get a little smaller, that's about 188 people per hour. If you want it to become more real, we've been talking for a little over 3 minutes. I have. You haven't been talking that much, but that's the way this works. That means there have been, I don't know, a bunch born in those 3. Matter of fact, about every time I snap my fingers, about 3 more people aren't born, but are added to our population every second. 3 more, 3 more, 3 more. It's just mind-boggling when you think just the logistics of all of that. That's how our world is. Can I just say this? We live in a crowded world. No matter where you go, it seems like you can turn left or right or go straight or backwards, you'll find more people. Now, what's weird about that, not that any of that matters to us very much because we don't live in the whole world, we live where we live, but in the middle of a really crowded world, here's the statistics that I find fascinating. 61% of people in the United States, 61% of people, when asked, say they are lonely. They regularly experience feelings of loneliness. 61% of people. Every 3 seconds, every second, 3 more people born. There's people everywhere. Almost 8 billion people. We're constantly surrounded. 61% of people say they experience loneliness on a very regular basis. Interestingly enough, to me at least, 58% of women who were asked said they feel loneliness. And then it comes to men. Now, would you think more men than women would say they feel lonely? My assumption is probably not, if not because they don't feel it, but just because less men would identify it or admit to it. But actually, statistics were different. 63% of men say they experience loneliness regularly in their life. Odd number for me, 73% of people who are heavy social media users. I don't think that means you're heavy and you use social media. I think it means you use a lot of social media. See what I did with that? Heavy social media users, 73% say they experience loneliness, whereas a much smaller percent say they do when they are lighter or lesser users of social media. The reason a lot of us use social media is to stay connected and in touch with and all of that. But oddly enough, the people who use it the most feel more loneliness in their life. I don't have some deep meaning in that. I just found it interesting. Well, at Christmas time, all of our feelings about most things seem to get magnified or blown up or focused on. It just brings it to the surface. And for a lot of people who deal with loneliness, around the Christmas season is when it's felt the most. Maybe that's you, or maybe it's not you, but it's somebody you know very well. It's a real thing. It's a real deal. Can I just say this? If you're going through times right now, even just thinking about the next week of your life, and you feel those feelings of loneliness, it's a big deal. It's not just something stupid. It's not something petty. It's a real thing. And it needs to be noticed. It needs to be brought to the surface and understood. We don't need to just pretend like it's not there. We're in a series called The Thrill of Hope. And the whole purpose of the series is to talk about that Christmas is a time of hope. But for people who are dealing with a lot of loneliness, this may be a season where you feel the least amount of hope. It's not based on facts. It's based on how you feel. And alone is a tough way to feel. So I wanted to give you two things, like side A and side B of a coin, in our talk in the next few minutes. Part of it, I wanted to look at what loneliness is, just big picture. And then I want to take a real quick look at God's opinion, God's view of loneliness, because it's been on his radar since the beginning of mankind. He's had loneliness as an issue he was addressing. So let's do it really quick. Let's start with this. Two kinds of loneliness. There may be a lot more. This is probably me taking a really thin layer of a really big deal. But here's where we'll start. Two kinds of loneliness. And don't roll your eyes when I say this first, because I know some of you roll your eyes. You wake up long enough to roll your eyes at me. It's hurtful when you do that, by the way. The first one is, first kind of loneliness is loneliness for the alone. I know, duh. You mean people who are alone could feel lonely? Yes, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Some of us are experiencing loneliness right now, and it's the result of, I really believe by now I would have a special someone in my life, and I don't. It could be through the loss of someone, that someone has passed away, and the people I've counted on, the people I've loved, and the people I've cherished and been around me. It may be just a different stage of life. It may be where your kids have moved away. Or it may be where in this season, for whatever reason, you're spaced out from the people who usually brought a lot of meaning to your life. It may be through the end of relationships that are just broken, and what once was isn't, or what you hoped would be isn't. But it's just right now you're at a stage of life where you don't just feel alone, you actually are quite alone. Whatever the reasons are. So there's loneliness for the alone. Now, if you had asked me, Chris, are you a lonely person? I said, I don't think I'm very lonely. I live in a pretty people-oriented world, and I thrive off of people. I don't think that would be me. I think over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I might have changed my mind a little bit about my own issues of loneliness. Because the second one is not just loneliness for the alone, it's loneliness. Here's the way I'll phrase it, loneliness for the crowded. It's loneliness for people who are surrounded by people. It's not that I'm alone, it's that I feel alone. And that's a big difference. It sounds a little, hey, if you're a guy here and you're like, oh, we're getting all touchy-feely, it does sound a little bit of that way. It is a little bit that way. One of the weird things, I sat with a guy 3 or 4 years ago, and we were sitting in a coffee shop that was full of people, like it was packed. It was prime time place. You couldn't find a seat. And as he was talking, he was saying, I feel so lonely. He's a young guy. Maybe late teens, early 20s, college student. And he was just saying, I feel more alone than I've ever felt in my life. He said, I go to a university and there are tens of thousands of people within such a small radius every day. You have to step over them to do something. We're sitting in this place and there were people like you couldn't hardly move your elbows without bumping into somebody. And he said, I feel more alone than I've ever felt. He's in a crowded world, but hey, listen, most of us have felt, you can be in a crowded room, you can be in a stadium full of people and feel really alone. That loneliness for the crowded is a reality, 8 billion people on the planet, but it doesn't mean you don't feel alone because there's more people. Really what it is that we don't feel like there's someplace we belong, or there's people who belong with us. The way I would say it is the greatest need in the human life, the human experience, is to feel like there's a place where you belong. By that, what I mean is, belong is to be known, and to be understood, and to be accepted. Now, we may not talk about it in those terms, but every one of us crave that. That is a desire that is built into the human fabric. We all want to believe there's a place and there's people where they know us for who we are, they fully know us. They still accept us and love us just the same. That's the place you belong. It's everybody's dream come true. We may not say it in those words, but it's the truth. And if you're not feeling that, even in a crowded room, even in a crowded world, you feel loneliness. What about you? You ever deal with that? It happens with some people because we end up in places that we thought were going to fix all that. We said if I could ever find the right someone, and then we found the someone, and now we're in a relationship, but we still don't feel that loved, accepted, understood, known, belonging, peace. Maybe it's God landed you in a family, but it doesn't feel like you're in a family that cares for you that way, and what you feel is alone. You just feel lonely. Not alone that there's no one else around, lonely as in there's no one else who gets it, who cares. It's a real deal. If you're feeling that, it is a heavy load to carry around. There's a cost that comes with loneliness. I won't take a lot of time, but the statistics show, and we'll just throw them up on the screen for you, that 26% increase in the likelihood of mortality for people who feel loneliness. And if you go all the way down, it increases for seniors who are lonely, it increases it even more. Heart disease is increased for people who feel loneliness. Stroke is increased, 32% more likely to have stroke. That loneliness and isolation, or the feeling of isolation, has so many effects. It has the same effects as alcoholism, or of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or of obesity. And then this thing that I read that really stuck in my mind is loneliness is more harmful for you physically than not exercising. And one of the problems is often when we feel lonely, we don't exercise either. It's like the double whammy. It's not funny, it's true. Sometimes we just laugh uncomfortably because it is so accurate. Feelings of loneliness typically beat us up. Once they start, they're heavy to carry around. It's like a backpack just loaded with hurt. When we feel those things, there's a tendency for us to react to those feelings. I don't know if you ever have seen or used a white noise machine. A white noise machine, the purpose of it isn't to make the noise in the world go away, but it's just to drown it out with something else. You can't stop the people in the next room, but sometimes you can turn on a white noise machine so you can sleep, so you hear less of that, so you just replace that or cover it up with something else. Often what we do when we have loneliness is we try to, hey, those feelings suck. We hate those feelings. And when we feel them, what we want to do is not feel them anymore. And so often we react. I've been asking people for the last 2 or 3 weeks, so what do you do when you feel lonely? And I won't give you all the answers because some of them are pretty personal, but what some people said is I Netflix binge, or Hulu, or whatever you like, Discovery or HBO or whatever it is for you. Used to people said, I go watch a movie or a show. Now we watch a season, you know. It's like I just get lost. You know what? I hate the feelings in my life, so I go try to just live life through something else. I escape in that way. For some people, their reaction or their escape comes different ways. Some people shop. And they go, it kind of get that endorphin rush of going and finding something, buying something. It's a short-term fix and usually just creates more problems. For some people, they add new relationships. They jump into, it's something that may not be healthy at all. Sometimes we're doing it because we hate the feeling of the relationships we have now, so we'll just jump into another one. Some people just stay in broken relationships. Talked to somebody not long ago that's dating someone, and they said, I know this isn't the right relationship, but the thought of me being alone again, I can't even fathom that. And if you heard somebody say that, you go, that's not healthy. Well, they know it's not healthy too, but the options just seem bad and worse. That's what loneliness does. Often we react to it. Some people said, that's when I use pot, or that's when I take pills, or that's when I change jobs, or that's when I moved. One of the answers I got several times, more times than I need to tell you about, is people say how I deal with that feeling of loneliness is wine. Not wine, although that works, that often happens as well, but not that. But it's just that, you know, every day when I settle in from a busy day and what I feel is like there's no place I really belong, I drink my way through it. Anything that will medicate that feeling and make it go away is what I do. I just want to say loneliness, it can often cost more than what we believe it can. I just remind you of a couple things, then we'll get off and move on to God's view of loneliness. First of all, loneliness is not an accusation. It's not a you're screwed up, what's wrong with you kind of thing. Loneliness is when you feel those feelings, it's just an invitation to something better. When you feel it, don't let it beat you up. Matter of fact, we might say it this way, don't ask what's wrong with me, just ask what's missing in me. And as you ask that, the answer is typically not going to be just that you're such a mess. It's going to be that maybe you need to focus on something else. So I'll leave the subject with these 3 things. If you're dealing with loneliness, and by the way, most of us are. Come on, we could just be real enough to say that. Most of us are dealing with it to some level. If you're dealing with it, 3 things, refuse. Refuse these 3 things. First, refuse to believe the feeling of loneliness. The feeling of loneliness says I'm all alone, and you are not. You are not. There are people in the world who care. There's a God in this world who cares. But you can't buy into the lie or the lie of that feeling that just says, I'm all alone, because you're not all alone. It may feel that way, but refuse to believe it, because when you let that voice ring through your head over and over, it will affect you in negative ways. Second one is refuse to act out of loneliness. Don't let loneliness be what motivates your next action, because usually your next action, when it comes from loneliness, will be towards something that will hurt even more, or that will actually increase your loneliness. That often the things we do when we feel lonely to try not to feel that way actually cause more. Often what we do is isolate ourselves because we feel lonely, and it causes more loneliness. Don't do that. And it leads us to the last one. And this one just seems like it's mean, almost salt in the wound. Don't fight loneliness alone. Okay, well, if it were that easy, I wouldn't be lonely. I get it. But I'm just going to tell you, one of the things you're going to have to push yourself to do, find a counselor or a therapist. Find friends who you can trust. Go to church, get in a group, find people in the world, go to CR. There are places in the world where you can tell your story and you'll be loved and accepted. And even if it doesn't come quickly or easily, don't stop. Don't fight loneliness alone, because it will overwhelm you. And loneliness moves into depression, and depression takes over your life. And some of you are going, yeah, you're telling me. And I'm not telling you, I'm just saying me too. Man, I have fought those things in my life, and you don't have to fight it alone. When we turn the page and we look at the other side, or we flip the coin, what does God think? If we got all this loneliness, how did God let that even enter into the world? Why doesn't he just fix that if he's God? Let me just start with this. All the way back in the beginning of time, like God created. Remember, that's where it all starts, in the beginning. In the beginning, if you're a baseball fan. In the beginning, God created. He created stuff, and then he added people. He added Adam first. And then there's this cool verse in Genesis 2:18. It tells you about how God views this issue of loneliness. He said, it's not good for man to be alone. Now, some of you go, well, it's not good for man to be alone because they'll probably destroy the universe. They'll never eat anything healthy. They'll never clean anything up. But I think it was bigger than that for him. He said, it's not good for man to be alone, so I'll make him a helper. A companion is what it says in one version. I'll make him a companion. I don't want him to be lonely. And God's cure for loneliness was two things. One, it was him. He said, the Bible says that he walked with man every day. So he was with man. And then he brought along someone else as a companion. He never intended for loneliness to be a part of our human experience. From the very beginning, and it worked. It said that every day in the cool of the evening that God would walk with them in the garden, and it was great. It was just good. There was no loneliness. And then it gives us all these weird little things. Right after it tells us about him doing that, it said, and they were naked and unashamed, which is just a weird addition to throw in to it. But the point being, they felt totally accepted, totally understood, totally known, totally belonged. That's the way it started, and that's the way God intended humankind to live. But right after that, if you just keep reading, sin entered in the world. You've probably heard the story, even if you haven't been to church a whole lot, that sin entered in the world, and immediately all of that good stuff stopped and all of the bad stuff started. It's where loneliness began. Matter of fact, it even talks about God walking through the garden saying, where are you? And all of a sudden there was a separation between God and man. And it's what sin does. It hurts and it breaks and destroys. It separates. And as a result, things went downhill quickly. Another weird little verse in the early parts of Genesis, it says this odd little note to add. It said, and God made leather clothing for Adam and his wife, and he dressed them. It's like the beginning was so perfect, and all of a sudden now there had to be a covering. We had to start covering things. And people have been covering up those feelings and covering up what was going on ever since. It wasn't the way life was intended. And so God has been left with this thing that sin separates people from him, and people have to feel and experience pain and difficulty they were never intended to experience. And so God has been building remedies for that. Now, way back in the Old Testament, the remedy was this. Here was kind of his equation. He said, I will do if you will do. That was his entry. It was kind of his invitation. I will do this if you will do that. It started way back, like in Leviticus 1, it says this. God called Moses and he spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, speak to the people of Israel and tell them when anyone presents an offering to God to present an animal from either the herd or the flock. And then he gave them like 18,000 rules for how to do it. But this is what he said. God said this, I'm going to be here. Like his presence was in the temple. I'm going to be here. You can come to me. So it's not God with us in the cool of the day. Now it's me here. You come to me. And here's the issue that sin separates us. We've got to do something for the atonement or the payment or the forgiveness of sin. He said, if you'll come to me and you will make sacrifice, then we will make things right between me and you again. If I will do this, I will forgive, I will make right if you will bring to me. And that's the way it was. And it wasn't a perfect system. It wasn't a great system. To be honest with you, it was horrible and bloody and repetitive and a little bit empty, but it was his answer to sin-separating people and loneliness that began. It was his first step in the process. But over the course of time, that wore so old. And what God wanted was life the way it was intended to be, God with people. People with people, God with people. Loneliness is not a part of the factor anymore. As a matter of fact, if you read through your whole Bible, you get past the front 2/3 of it and you land in what we call the New Testament. It's where we land in this Christmas season. In Matthew 1, it says this. It says, watch for this. A virgin will get pregnant and bear a son, and they will name him Emmanuel. The Hebrew meaning for that, literally what it means is God with us. See what he's doing? He's saying no longer is the equation going to be this. You come to me and I'll make right. It's going to be this, that I'll come to you. I'll come to where you are. God with us. It was why he gave his son. It's why we celebrate this Christmas season. It has been such a big deal. And as people came around, they came and worshiped and did all the things that we tell in the Christmas story. But the whole purpose of that wasn't the birth of his son. It was that the death of his son would someday do away with this system of sacrifice completely, that once and for all he would sacrifice and bring things back together between God and man. And when he did that, he came to earth as a representation or as God. So people could say, what's God like? Well, there he is. That's what God looks like in human form. The problem was after his death, he paid the price for us, but the problem was then he was going to be gone. But he was so concerned about my loneliness and your loneliness. This is what he said in John 14. He said, if you love me, show it by doing what I've told you. I will talk to the Father and he will provide you another friend. Some versions say another comforter, so that you will always have someone with you. This friend is the Spirit of truth. He had literally said, I will leave you my Spirit. I am so concerned with your loneliness that I want you to know you don't have to react through whining or whining. You don't have to react through spending or taking on more things that you don't need. You don't have to respond through running away. You don't have to respond through white noise to drown it out. That I will come and be with you. That I will not leave you alone, that I am with you. I am not only with you, but I'll leave you my Spirit to be with you forever. That's this incredible promise. If you deal with loneliness, it is the start to the cure. I know it sounds like an easy pat Bible answer to a really difficult problem, but it is the basis that we have to start from. You can't make things right other places until it's right in your heart, and where it's right in your heart is when we allow God's Spirit to be part of our life. Long time ago, I've got a daughter, she's 23, so when she was first born, she was just this perfect gift for us. We were so excited as a family to add Claire to our world, but about her first birthday, she started having seizures, and it freaked us out. We don't know anything about seizures. We'd never dealt with that. So we took her to every kind of doctor you can imagine. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on tests, all these hours going through processes. And eventually, she was diagnosed with epilepsy. Well, part of that process, we took her to a pediatric neurologist, and we were just trying to find answers. We're scared to death. She's scared to death. Here's a picture of her, as a matter of fact. Back in those days, she's just this little girl who was scared of everything, who had to go get poked and prodded and tested in all these ways. We took her to this doctor, and we walked in, and he's a big guy, about 6'2", got to be 275, 80 pounds, maybe more. He's got this big pot belly sticking out in front, but because he's a pediatric specialist, he's got on like a Mickey Mouse tie or something like that, which kind of has to be extra long to cover all of everything. You know what I mean? And he like stands up and he's way up here and she's about this tall and she's way down here and she's scared to death. And he comes in and immediately starts asking her all these questions. Well, do you? I mean, she's like, 2. She doesn't know how to answer those questions. And he is so big and she is so small and he is so aggressive in his questions. And then he starts running her through all these neurological tests. And if you've ever had to go to a neurologist, they just test motor function and all that. He would say, I want you to touch your nose with your finger and then touch my finger. And I want you to take steps, put one foot in front, tell her all these things. She's just staring at him. She's not reacting. She doesn't do any of them well. He is so intimidating. He is so big. He is so brash. He is so forward moving. And she's just this scared little girl. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you suck at being a doctor. You may know a lot, but you are bad at this job. I don't know anything about neurological issues in kids, but I know this, you got issues. And I just want to punch the guy. When he gets finished, he gives this horrible prognosis for her. Like, everything he said was wrong because she responded badly to the test. The reason she responded badly to the test is because of him. He sucked at being a doctor. If you're watching it, whoever you are, guy, I can't remember your name, consider another job. You know what I mean? And so we kept looking for doctors, and we finally found one that somebody out in California who could get her into this doctor in Wisconsin. And so we take her to Wisconsin, and we go and we sit down, and we're in a children's hospital, and it's a teaching hospital, so it's associated with the Wisconsin School of Medicine and Pediatrics. And so this lady walks in, and it's taken months to get there, and if we hadn't had some pull, it would have taken years to get a first appointment with her. And we walk in, and I have no idea what to expect. They've already put us through enough paperwork. We've killed 412 trees. And we're sitting there, and we're all scared. I'm not sure we even want to know the answers to what's wrong. And this little lady walks in. Her name is Dr. Mary Zuponk, Dr. Z. We called her, and she walks in and she's got all these people following her because it's a teaching hospital. They're all wearing white coats and they take a lot of notes and do whatever she says. And so they sit down, they stand up. She jumps up on the table and takes Claire and puts her there right beside her. And she says, hello, Claire, I'm Dr. Z, and I've got to talk to your mom and dad for a few minutes. And she opens up her bag with her stethoscope and all of her other doctor tools in it that are probably worth insane amounts of money. She didn't have toys for her. And she said, play with all of these and sit here right by me while I talk to your mom and dad. And then she starts asking us all the questions. Well, I'm watching Claire. This lady has got a dress on that's probably worth more than my car is. She's decked out. She's got degree after degree. She has all of these credentials. And she's sitting there, and she's sitting with Claire and got her arm around her. And Claire's like putting the stethoscope in her ears, and then she's like putting it on places that I'm not sure she should have been putting it. And we're like, nah, and Dr. Z's like, oh, leave her alone. And Claire starts climbing up on her, and she's like looking in her eyes while Dr. Z's so unflinching with it. She just goes, leave her alone, she'll be fine. She's so smart. And what she was doing is she put Claire and her on the same level. No big, I'm smart, I'm brash, I'm loud, I'm big. Just I'll come down, just this little lady who's a doctor who allowed Claire into her world. And after about 15 minutes of asking questions, and Claire's climbed all over, she's messed up her hair, she's poked her and prodded her, listened to, looked at, and then she starts talking with Claire, and she puts her through all the same tests that she did, that the big ridiculous doctor did. And one by one, we saw different responses. But mostly what we saw is a different response from our little girl that we love so much, that when something came to her level, she lost her fear. She felt understood and cared for, and she felt safe enough to be clear in that moment. And as a result, we got great prognosis, and we found medications that would help, and it changed our world, all because somebody who was so good at their job did just the right things, not to know more about it, but to move in a way that made us feel like she was approachable. That is exactly the story of Christmas, that God said, big God, little me. I'll be here, you come here. I'll do if you'll do. All of that went away, and Jesus came and he said, I will come down to your level. You can sit on the table with me. I will give my life. I will experience loneliness. I will experience all the pain you've experienced. I will be with you, and not only that, when I'm through, I will leave you my spirit so you will never have to be alone. And can I just tell you this, if you're experiencing loneliness this Christmas season, I am so sorry. Me too, a little. And I know it's big and you don't need a pat answer, but can I say you are not alone? That there is someone who saw you coming and who gave his son, and a son who gave his life. And he didn't do it as big, super righteous God. He came down to our level and lived in our dirty world and died and lived with humankind and then gave us his spirit. And you are not alone, and I'm not alone. And I refuse to live as if I am. And may the God who gave all of that for you be felt during this Christmas season. Refuse to go it alone. Refuse to believe the lie. And refuse to act out of your loneliness. Instead, act out of your acceptance that God loves you and accepts you. And may this be your very best Christmas ever. Thanks for watching.